Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Ladar Greve-Lazian. Coming up in today's newscast. An Israeli soldier was killed overnight as Israel was withdrawing its forces from Jenin following an anti-terror operation. The IDF hits targets in Gaza after terror organizations fire missiles into Israel. And joining us today in the studio are two young Jewish leaders from JNF-USA's JNF Future leadership mission in Israel. There has been so much misinformation regarding the IDF Counterterror Operation in Jenin, and it's important to set the facts straight, and so we're here to break it down for you. One of the most basic and common questions being asked is, why did Israel launch an attack on Jenin? Well, first of all, Israel did not attack Jenin or Palestinian civilians, but what we saw these past 2 days was a counter-terror operation targeting terrorists and terrorist facilities. Jenin, by the way, is not a refugee camp, but a bustling city with some 15,000 residents. It's a densely populated area, and this is precisely why in recent months, terrorists, specifically Palestinian Islamic Jihad, backed by the Iranian regime, has infiltrated the city and set up its terror operations there, hiding near or even inside schools, hospitals, and mosques. In recent months, over 50 terror attacks against Israeli men, women, and children have been launched from Jenin. Take a look at this video. It shows the IDF uncovering a massive stash of explosives and weapons inside a mosque, a house of worship that was intended for use against Israeli civilians. And here is another video showing that the terrorists have even planted improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, on the roads in Jenin. And it's important to note that this endangers not only Israeli civilians, but also Palestinian civilians as well. And this is exactly why the IDF conducted this operation, to root out terrorism against Israel. Another claim being made is that Israel is killing innocent Palestinians and Palestinian children. This is a lie. As the operation comes to a close, we now know that 18 Palestinians were killed, all of them known terrorists. And yes, among them were terrorists under the age of 18 years old, recruited by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad as children and given weapons and masks and urged to go out and kill Israelis. Where is the global outcry over this horrific use of children? The simple truth is that this operation was conducted by Israel to root out terrorism inside Jenin. It was an operation conducted to defend Israel and to defend Israeli civilians and Palestinian civilians alike. And a soldier was killed overnight as IDF troops were withdrawing from Jenin at the end of the 2-day anti-terror operation. Early this morning, the pullout from Jenin was completed by the IDF. The Army says 18 terrorists were killed and terrorist infrastructure, including explosives labs, were destroyed. More on this report from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Sergeant First Class David Yehuda Yitzchak, age 23, from the elite Egoz Commando Unit, was shot and killed just as the counter-terror operation in Jenin came to a close. Yitzchak, from the town of Bet El, was laid to rest this afternoon at Jerusalem's Mount Herzl Military Cemetery. The only Israeli fatality in the 2-day operation came during the pullout of some 1,000 troops that was completed by the Army early this morning. Grateful Israeli residents of nearby Jewish communities long harassed by terrorists warmly greeted the soldiers as they left Jenin. There were sporadic clashes between Palestinian gunmen and Israeli troops in the final hours of the operation, including an airstrike targeting terrorists hiding in a cemetery. According to the IDF, at least 18 Palestinian terrorists were killed by Israeli forces during the 2-day anti-terror operation. All of those killed were involved in the fighting, but there were some non-combatants among the wounded, according to the Army. Israel launched the operation to crack down on the hotbed of terror in the northern Samaria Palestinian city. The operation focused on a local wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group known as the Jenin Battalion, as well as other smaller armed groups in the city. Prime Minister Netanyahu made clear this was not a one-time operation.
ואני יכול לומר שהפעולה הנרחבת שלנו בג'נין איננה חד פעמית. אנחנו נמשיך ככל שדרוש כדי לגדוע את הטרור. אנחנו לא נאפשר לג'נין לחזור להיות עיר מקלט לטרור.
The Army said that 30 suspects are being held on suspicion of terrorist involvement. Troops located and demolished at least 8 weapons storage sites, 6 explosives labs with hundreds of prime devices, 3 war rooms used by Palestinian gunmen to observe Israeli forces, and other terrorist infrastructure. The Army also seized 24 assault rifles, 8 handguns, and ammunition. The IDF operation followed some 50 shooting attacks carried out by terrorists in the area, and 19 wanted terrorists had escaped to Jenin to seek refuge there from Israeli forces.
And joining us now with more on the counter-terror operation in Jenin is CEO and founder of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Aviv. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Ella. Hi.
So the IDF withdrew all its troops from Jenin overnight, the operation now coming to an end. How would you sum up this operation?
Well, we've seen the IDF operating for a year and a half in an ongoing operation that on the tactical level was very successful. Our soldiers were going in and out, apprehending many terrorists, targeting terrorists, and having very good tactical achievements. But the overall picture was that in the northern part of Samaria, and especially in Jenin, in the camp in Jenin, the terror infrastructure kept growing amid all these operations of the IDF. So obviously this operation was needed. We needed to go with a big force, a brigade, go and raid this camp and destroy all this infrastructure. I think it was done in a very clever way. The Israeli Defense Forces utilized the Air Force in a very sophisticated way, targeting many headquarters and positions before the force went in. This completely disrupted the terrorist organization inside the camp, and started fleeing their positions into the center of the camp and out the camp. And due to that, the IDF was able to maneuver into the camp without any resistance, and in a few hours really be able to maneuver everywhere inside the camp, apprehend more than 100 suspects, really destroy many infrastructures inside the camp. So overall, this is a very successful operation. You know, when you look, for example, at the fighting in Ukraine, and you see the level of losses that the Russians are suffering from, and also the Ukrainians. And on the other hand, you see the ability of the IDF to go into one of the most dense areas with many, many terrorists inside and manage to do it in such an amazing way. We definitely have the best army in the world.
Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu is constantly saying that Israel is changing the equation when it comes to terror and relying also on technological advances. So did we see this in action here in this latest operation in Jenin?
Well, what I saw in this operation is the IDF really utilizing all its capabilities, being able to coordinate very closely between the Air Force, the intelligence, top units, the border patrol, and this all together really made it possible to achieve very good operational results. But we have to understand, this is just the beginning. The test is really from now onwards, being able to operate freely inside, making sure there is no safe haven for terrorists anywhere in Judea and Samaria, being able to go with small forces and not needing a whole brigade in order to operate, and also in time diminishing constantly the terror infrastructure and the terrorist capabilities. And for doing that, you need continuous operation of the IDF, and this is maybe just the first big operations since 2002, but we need to really push forward and continue operating all the time.
So that actually leads me to my next question, because Prime Minister Netanyahu really did make clear that this would not be the only operation in Jenin. So is this what we can expect looking forward? More military operations in Jenin?
What we are going to expect is the intelligence to provide accurate intelligence about terrorists and infrastructure. And following that, the IDF going in, raiding again and again, and apprehending terrorists, destroying infrastructure. But the more we do it, the less we'll have to deal with big operations. So when you don't deal with it for a long time, then you find yourself at the end of the day really needing to do a large-scale operation as we did now. But if you operate on an everyday basis, you can prevent this reality and keep the town safe and also our soldiers.
Absolutely. Keeping Israelis safe, the priority of this operation. Amir Aviv, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
And so we know the news is fast-paced, and we want to let you know that ILTV's new app is now available. So if you want to stay connected to the latest news from Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, download our app now on all your devices. It's available in the App Store for both Android and iPhone. And moving on, as the operation in Jenin has wrapped up, it has been astonishing, although perhaps unsurprising, to see some of the very one-sided coverage by some international media organizations. One such example is a BBC News interview held Tuesday night with former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. The anchor asking him if the IDF is happy killing children. Take a look.
The Israeli forces are happy to kill children.
You know, it's quite remarkable that you'd say that, because they're killing us. Now, if there's a 17-year-old Palestinian that's shooting at your family, Anjana, what is he?
Under your definition, you are calling them terrorists. The UN are calling them children.
No, I'm actually asking you, what would you call a 17-year-old person with a rifle shooting at your family and murdering your own family? How would you define that person?
We're not talking about that. The UN has defined them as children. The UN has defined them as children, and we know that 4 people between the ages of 16 and 18 have been killed in this targeted attack. Let's not forget, it's a targeted attack. The Israeli forces are going in looking
these are
for
terrorists.
these people.
I'm missing something. You know, a 17-year-old terrorist can murder civilians.
And so joining us now with more on the international coverage of the Jenin operation is Gil Hoffman, Executive Director of Honest Reporting. Gil, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure being with you, Lidar.
So happy killing children. I'm at a loss for words. You know, former Prime Minister Bennett tweeting that this was one of the most hostile interviews with regards to Israel that he can remember. Is this how the BBC has been covering the operation in Jenin?
Absolutely. They have been painting Israel as an aggressor throughout this operation. They have made it look as if it's unjustified that Israel's purposely targeting children, not pointing out that every single person killed in this operation was a combatant, was a member of a terror organization, recognized as a terror organization by England, by America, by the world.
So the BBC interview is just one example. I mean, what can you tell us regarding the overall coverage of the operation in Jenin by international media? In Jenin by international media. Okay, Tamshihu.
I really wish they would have understood the context better. There were 50 terror attacks that came out of Jenin over the past year, and it should be obvious that Israel's doing this to prevent further harm to Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Israeli civilians and enable the Palestinians living in Jenin and throughout the area to have a better life by getting these terrorists out of the way. And that has not been painted that way by any means. I wish the world would have reported the Palestinian political context of Abbas losing power in Jenin and other areas around there and how serious that is. I wish they would have reported the Iranian context of Iran seeking a nuclear deal and proving it's a player by using its Islamic Jihad militia against Israel. They haven't done that at all.
And you know, the BBC was one example. What about other outlets? Can you provide any other examples, any other specific examples?
Yeah, the New York Times has painted Jenin as the base for armed struggle, you know, really painting the terrorists as a bastion of Palestinian armed struggle, resistance, as if they're fighting for freedom instead of using terrorism in order to murder as many Jews as possible. The fact that they play up these terrorists and try to make them into freedom fighters, which could not be further from the truth, has been very disappointing.
And so why is it? I mean, do you think that some of the international media are so biased in their coverage when it comes to Israel?
I guess they want to root for an underdog, and they're confused about who the underdog is. You know, I'm a Cubs fan. I know what it's like to root for an underdog, and it's not easy. But Israel is the underdog in the Middle East. Among 22 Arab states, 57 Muslim states, one Jewish state, and yet the narrative has changed as if it's the Palestinians are the underdog and Israel is this hostile, strong aggressor, and we need to remind ourselves that the Jews are the most discriminated against minority in the world, and Israel is the most targeted by terrorism country in the world, and it is what it is. We're the victims here.
All right, Gil Hoffman, thank you so much for your insight today. And moving on, Gaza terrorists responded at the very end of the Jenin incursion by firing 5 rockets toward Israel early Wednesday morning. The IDF was on alert, and the Iron Dome air defense system managed to knock down all of the missiles, but shrapnel from an interceptor hit a home in Sderot, causing damage to a ceiling, but no injuries. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The rocket fire from Gaza overnight was not unexpected. The IDF was on alert around Gaza, anticipating terrorist rocket fire to demonstrate unity with the terrorists in Jenin. The terrorists did fire 5 rockets, but the Iron Dome air defense system managed to knock down all of the missiles. The only damage caused on the ground was by shrapnel that hit a home in Sderot, causing damage to a ceiling but no injuries. In response to the rocket attack, IDF fighter jets went into action, striking an underground Hamas weapons manufacturing facility as well as a chemicals plant used in the rockets. A Palestinian security source said there were no injuries. There was no claim of responsibility for the rocket fire. Israel says it holds Hamas, which rules the Strip, responsible for all attacks emanating from the territory, regardless of the group launching the attack. The rocket fire was the first from the coastal enclave since May 14th, when a ceasefire between Israel and the Islamic Jihad in Gaza took effect after 5 days of cross-border fighting.
And 4 people injured in yesterday's terrorist car ramming in Tel Aviv remain hospitalized in serious condition. The 20-year-old terrorist did not have an entry permit to Israel, but had no known prior security offenses. More from ILTV's William Sharon.
4 Israelis injured in the attack remain in hospital in serious condition, and 2 required surgery. A woman who was pregnant lost her baby due to the attack. The police identified the attacker as Abad Aluhev Khaleila, age 20, from the town of Ashmo in the South Hebron Hills area. The Shin Bet security agency said the terrorist did not have an entry permit to Israel, but had no known prior security offense. The Hamas terror group said Khaleila was a member, but stopped short of claiming responsibility for the attack. After the terrorist rammed a bus stop with his van, he climbed out of his vehicle and stabbed passbyers. The terrorist briefly chased a civilian who was armed. He shot and killed the terrorist before he could do further damage. The terrorist had been employed in Tel Aviv and used his employer's car for the attack. The terrorist reportedly told his employer he was going out to buy supplies before the attack. An investigation is ongoing.
And now in other news, the connection between American Jewish youth and Israel is diminishing. But there are still many Jewish youth interested in keeping this special relationship alive. And so JNF-USA has launched a special program, JNF Future, which brings together young adults, future leaders of the Jewish community, who share a commitment and passion for Israel. And they are now on a leadership mission here in Israel. And so joining us now are 2 of JNF Futures participants, Trey Meehan and Ali Robinson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Good to be here.
So, you know, we often hear about apathy and disaffiliation from a lot of young Gen Y and Gen Z. Why did you both decide to step out from the sidelines and get involved sort of as future leaders for your Jewish communities?
I mean, for me, that motivates me. That's showing that I need to step up. I need to represent my generation, and I need to be an advocate for Israel. And JNF really gives us that platform to do so. So for me, I just feel like it's so vital, and it's such an important thing for everyone to know that we need to stand up and we need to be positively Israel, and we need to spread that to our communities.
Likewise, representation is really important, and I feel a really strong sense of responsibility to represent our generation and make sure that our voices are heard and that our perspectives and concerns are addressed and heard.
Now you're on a one-week leadership mission to Israel, and so during your trip, you know, what have you seen? What's inspired you?
I know I've been really inspired by just meeting so many different Israelis and hearing their kind of visions for their communities and for Israel, and the role that JNF plays in those visions.
Yeah, and we just came back from the north, so we really got to see all the developments that are happening up there. We saw the Food Technology Center in Kiryat Shmona, we saw the housing projects. So just to see really the impact that the Jewish National Fund is having in Israel is very incredible. And then, as Trey said, to really meet the people who are the pioneers who are moving up there to just really develop the land.
And so we spoke about apathy and sort of disaffiliation. Do you feel like your generation, you know, is adequately represented then on the boards and committees of sort of the more established Jewish organizations?
I mean, I think there's definitely always work to be done, of course. I do find that a lot of organizations do have young professional divisions, but I do have to say that as a JNF Future, we not only have a division, but we have a seat at the table, and our voice is heard, and we are able to really contribute. And like we said before, it's not just important to have that seat, but you need to take that seat. So I think it's up to us to really want to be involved and want to make changes and want to kind of go with JNF's vision for the future of Israel and make our mark.
So having a seat at the table, absolutely. And Trey, what about you?
I feel the exact same way. I think what Ali was saying, that the seat at the table is important. It's a two-way street, but also that, like we were talking about with the representation, we have to make sure that we have to take the seat and speak up and share our perspectives, because if we don't do that, then those concerns and our feelings and things like that are not going to be heard.
And so, you know, I want to ask, what's your message, let's say if you had a message, to other potential young Jewish leaders who are considering maybe applying for JNF future leadership mission in Israel, or just, you know, want to be more involved in sort of their communities with regards to Israel?
I think, coming on JLM is a wonderful opportunity to build community, to be around other young professionals, but also to be here in Israel and see the work that's, that JNF is involved in, and actually being, impacted, how the work that JNF is doing impacts the land and people of Israel.
And Ali?
Yes, Sam, and also just the opportunity to travel around Israel with like-minded peers from around the country is so impactful and so incredible. And just to see the work, like Trey said, to really see firsthand the work and where your money is going and the impact you're having, it's really incredible. And Trey and I are from different places. We just met this week, so it's just, you really have a community then around the U.S. to really promote this message.
Well, Trey and Ali, I mean, thank you so much for joining us today in the studio and for sort of the inspiring work that you're doing in your communities and also here in Israel. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight with lows of around 21 degrees Celsius or 70 Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see cloudy skies alongside top temperatures, seeing highs of about 32 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm the Dargave Lazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.